we're approaching a turning point in the story. The plate is going to be dropped on Sector 7.
Yeah.
I think that it is probably the most successful adaptation of the scene from the original title.
Mm-hmm.
In that game, because of the lower fidelity, and because it happens really quickly once the game is started, just a few hours in, I think. I knew it happened, but whenever the concept was introduced in this title, I went, oh yeah, that does happen, doesn't it?
Yeah.
It doesn't have the same weight in the original.
Yeah.
But here, it's not something that I'm likely to forget.
Well, how did they deliver it in the original?
Similarly, a lot of it had to do with the build-up. The Midgar portion in the original title, what is basically this entire game, was closer to like a tutorial.
So I see the Spectres are back.
Oh, what? Yeah, sure, Spectres. Sorry I haven't been talking about what's on screen very much. I just don't have much to say about Spectres this time. By the time I was really getting into this battle, it ended, which I wasn't expecting. I think that there must be some sort of invisible timer.
Yeah.
Because the enigmatic Spectre, it regenerates health. And at one point I looked over to check, and it had regenerated to full HP, and the battle ended soon after. I didn't feel like it was important enough to try again to see if it is possible to clear on hard mode.
Yeah.
Because it kept the story moving, and really I just wanted an opportunity to talk about the plate dropping. Other than Cloud's characterization,
yeah,
I've been avoiding talking about a lot of narrative stuff. I would like to take a moment to discuss one thing just because it does relate to the mechanics, and it's interesting to me. I think I've mentioned it before. Sometimes characters, when they're defeated, they become Mako.
Yeah, they return to the Lifestream.
Yeah, and that signifies to me that they have actually perished. Coming up, while we're ascending the tower, it is littered with bodies. I don't want to say corpses, because it runs counter to what I feel.
Yeah.
And whenever you leave Jesse and Biggs, when they presumably are mortally wounded, they don't turn into Mako.
Yeah, that's odd.
Yeah, and Biggs is actually shown to be alive at the end of the game. It's one of the last things they show you in the whole title. So I have to wonder, are they trying to suggest that all of the people going up the tower, are they all really just unconscious? I think it might speak to a kind of natural resilience that people of this universe possess, where it really is possible for them to be beaten down, be attacked quite fiercely, and for them to merely be knocked unconscious.
Yeah. Well, and it wouldn't deliver so much on the story if you didn't see how many people were harmed already.
Well, here's the thing. They could have done that by having Mako stream away from the tower.
Yeah, gosh, that would have been moody. If you're invested in the world, like seeing Mako stream away from a fight, that would be just heart-wrenching.
There's a scene where Aerith tells her adoptive mother that a spirit has contacted her, has come a long way to express remorse for having perished. And I am left to wonder, maybe as long as, and this goes deep, this also relates to Jesse's dad, who is in a coma.
Yeah.
And Jesse thinks that his spirit might be trapped somewhere in the Lifestream. All of those points taken together, I kind of wonder if there's a variable, sort of like a half-life on the dead and dying in Final Fantasy VII's universe. Maybe some of these people have perished, but their Mako energy, their essence, is lingering nearby because they haven't come to terms with it yet. I kind of wonder if someone has unresolved business, if they have to travel 1,000 miles to glimpse a friend or a family member, maybe their body will remain until they've achieved that.
Yeah, so like you can't return to the live stream until your ghost is done?
Yeah, and your body might not disappear until you've returned to the live stream.
Interesting.
Turning our attention back to the mechanics, Helitroopers I actually quite like them. They're an interesting enemy with a wide variety of attacks, and Chapter Select just doesn't do them any favors. You're about to see that I roast both of these with a single fire attack, and that's not even like the fun element to use on them.
Yeah.
They respond in a much more fun, interesting way to arrow.
Yeah.
Yeah, because it kind of whirls them around and knocks them off balance. But fire, I feel like they have a fairly straightforward system of vulnerabilities for non-boss enemies, where humanoids are usually weak to fire, monstrous enemies are often weak to ice, mechanical enemies are weak to lightning, and anything that flies is additionally weak to wind. This battle sort of woke me from a stupor. There's enough enemy variety that I had to pay attention, even though they were just regular enemies.
That's interesting, because the regular enemies have been trivial. They've just been trivial since the beginning.
Yeah, it has been cast a fire spell, win.
Yeah.
Or occasionally cast an ice spell, win.
Mm-hmm.
Here, they have a nice balance across the team with the elite shock troopers up front, the heli troopers in the midfield, and then the turrets attacking from long range. Here's a big one. Maybe not as big as people online would lead you to believe. While I was watching this game on Playframe, I noticed in the comment section people talking about how, like, ooh, Reno and Rude on hard mode. If Dan ever does that, you gotta brace for impact. It's a big one.
Yeah.
I was let down by that assertion because it was sort of hyped up like the Orstein and Smo of this game. There are parallels to be drawn. You know, you've got sort of like a big guy and sort of a sprightly guy. Some of the elements are the same, I guess. There's some lightning. Yeah, there's some lightning around. But I think that those players may have fallen victim to, it's an understandable trope to fall prey to, and that's the idea that status ailments are useless against bosses. They often are. In a lot of RPGs, you'll use a status ailment that can be an enormous help against regular enemies. If you try to use it on a boss, they'll just be immune, and you've just wasted a turn, wasted MP. But by using analysis in this title, you can get pretty accurate information on a boss's vulnerabilities. Reno and Rude are both vulnerable to poison and sleep.
Oh.
Yes. The order of operations here, and how I feel about Reno and Rude, it's a little squirrely.
Yeah.
I didn't think much of them, as I've mentioned before, just playing the original game, but I like them quite a lot after seeing Advent Children.
Yeah.
So, effectively, the first real exposure I had to them was in Advent Children. It creates this unsettling feeling where I like these two often comical characters, even though they are very clearly complicit in a near atrocity. It's not as devastating, but only because your characters evidently, this is, I feel like it's said and not shown.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess they show people running, but not the entire sector.
Yeah.
But they imply that it was supposed to be an atrocity that they could blame on Avalanche, and that they are disappointed in that it was mostly property damage instead. Avalanche successfully organizes an evacuation.
Yeah, and they are on the bad guy team for sure, but I can't help but find them hilarious.
Yeah, and they're kind of cool. I mean, Rude is a cool dude. He's got a great look. Reno's a little over the top for me. So I was gonna say that it's a shame that it's not a 3v3 because they're so close, you know?
Yeah.
I've said before that I think that this game is at its best whenever you're playing with two characters on your team.
Yeah.
But if you're going to have three party members, maybe find more opportunities to have 3-on-3 battles. But how could I forget Helicopter? So it really is a 3-on-3, think about it that way. I can't think of a way to sugarcoat it. They got me. this is footage from a failed attempt, but the beginning of the battle was solid. The pyramid, if it dealt damage at all in normal, it was not a lot of damage. By the time I figured out what was happening, it was already too late and Tifa was going to be KO'd. So they did get me, as much as I was being that guy, like it's actually not that difficult if you, read.
Adjusts glasses.
Yeah, exactly.
Produces new glasses, adjusts them again. But they did get you.
They did get me with Pyramid, but not again. After I figured out that game, they didn't get me with it again. This is going to be a Barret-centric episode. Really, from this point on, Barret is the only character that can effectively deal with a lot of ranged threats. Even more so than Aerith. Her basic spell attack has a travel time that in a lot of situations makes her strictly inferior to the immediacy of Barret's attacks.
Yeah.
I much prefer him when I'm dealing with ranged targets. So in this battle, he's the clear choice to fight the helicopter.
Yeah.
Is there anything else in particular that I have to say about Barret and the helicopter? I mean, I think it's funny. You have all of these parallels, so Cloud and Reno, they mirror one another, and you have the fist fighters. I guess the helicopter has a gun for a nose. That's Barret-esque.
Yeah. And the helicopter and Barret both carry the team sometimes. Oh.
So the fight really starts here. And it starts with a sad little moment here. Reno seems to have some serious remorse, some serious regret, and then it's just wiped away.
Straight comedy.
So I see here things do get a little hectic, but casting poison on them puts a timer on the battle, you know? Eventually they will run out of HP, and it's a little frustrating when I first try it. I cast Sleep, and then I see a tag for Shockwave.
Yeah.
And I don't think that Sleep expired that quickly on its own. I think that someone woke Rude up, which is just so rude.
Yeah. It drives me crazy how frequently the AI goes off and goes, "Oh, did you have a plan? Oh, were you planning something? Let me just wake them up for you."
Or let me stand right here. I'm gonna stand right in front of the pipe.
Yeah. Did you want me to survive this, or like? I mean, I was just gonna make you use a bunch of heals on. It's like totally useless. It sort of makes me. It's like, what's the point of having 3 people on a team if they're not working together as a team?
Well, you know, I've been thinking about it. I've avoided comparing this game directly to non-Final Fantasy titles and the original Final Fantasy VII because I find that those kinds of comparisons, they're not useful if you're not familiar with those games. I'm going to start doing that more for a couple of reasons. One, that kind of comparative analysis, I find it to be very helpful. The other reason, it's because we're over halfway through this, and I feel like if you sit down and watch, 3 hours of commentary on a video game, it's probably not your first one. You'll be able to imagine those other mechanisms of play, even if you haven't experienced them firsthand. So, this title has more similarities to a game like Devil May Cry than one might initially imagine. There are some obvious parallels. For example, Focus Thrust is highly reminiscent of Stinger.
Yeah.
But if you stop and break everything down to its core elements, you realize that you can view this game through a lens where what they've essentially done, they have divided Dante's core arsenal across 3 characters. Basically what they've done is they've made it to where his sword attacks are given to Cloud, Ebony and Ivory it's Barret.
Yeah.
And one of the series' punchy weapons, that's Tifa.
Yeah.
And once you think of the game in that way, cracks start to form. At least in my mind. Because, let me file the serial numbers off. I want to tell you about a game that's kind of like Devil May Cry, but whenever you switch weapons, it teleports you to a random location on the battlefield. So see how that sounds really bad? Also, every weapon, each of Dante's weapons, has its own hit point value. See how weird this is getting? I've got more to say on the subject later. The last thing that I want to say about this battle, I didn't get any footage of it because it was so unexpected. It caught me by surprise. They drastically reduce the amount of time you have to escape after this battle on hard mode. I'm pretty sure you have like half a minute to do some pretty basic pathing. You just have to run around some holes in the platform.
Yeah.
As plates fall away. In hard mode, I'm pretty sure you have 7 seconds. And
that's a little drastic.
Dicks. Ultimately, the only thing that I'm really disappointed in about that battle, I saved Ascension to use on Reno here, but things didn't line up, and I didn't want to repeat the battle just for something so frivolous, you know?
Yeah.
But that's life, you know?
Yeah.
It's life on the ground, I think. I was going to say it's life on the rim, but that's the wrong property. Time for another wild card. Probably my favorite summon to do battle with in this game, Leviathan. Leviathan, you get to beat up on it for a while because it has a lot of HP, like, say, Fat Chocobo. But unlike Bahamut, I feel that it's a little more obvious in its patterns and how you can interact with the boss.
Yeah.
How it is interrupted and how you defend against its various functions. I also like that it is a Barret-centric battle. I saw some people online giving out what I consider to be bad advice, recommending that you bring Aerith to fight Leviathan.
Yeah.
If I recall correctly, its analysis says that it is vulnerable to lightning, but it is resistant to magic. To me, that sends a clear signal that you want physical lightning damage at range, and I've just defined Barret with elemental thunder on his weapon, you know?
Yeah. Well, and this just goes back to what you were saying during the Rude and Reno battle about him being a good distance fighter, even better than Aerith.
I think it's because of his weapon abilities, people imagine him as a tank and nothing more. I wonder if maybe those weapon abilities might have been a misstep as they're presented in this game, because I feel like people treat them like really rigid class distinctions, and that's just not the case. The characters have a lot of flexibility to them.
Yeah. Do they fall into any particular roles for you?
Well, Barret specifically spends a lot of time as my healer. Just because his attacks, as far as I can tell, are hit scan. They hit as you press the fire button, and it allows him to gain ATB very consistently, so he can basically prey on demand. In this battle, though, it's all Barret all the time. He's the guy for this battle until Leviathan is staggered. Here we have a rare instance of backtracking in this game. It seems like a risky proposition, sending you back here. Other Final Fantasy titles, 13 and 10 in particular, they were criticized for having corridor design.
Yeah.
Long hallways that you had to navigate. And this is the most explicit example of that kind of design in this game. They subverted my expectations, though, by offering a different path about halfway through. It happens pretty quickly once you make it inside. But it is curious. It's curious that they would risk it. Honestly, the complaints against Final Fantasy X and 13 especially for me, it seems a little misplaced just because, if anything, they're just being more honest. I have a pet peeve where people say, oh, the Final Fantasy, you can explore and the world map is so open and it's a non-linear experience. And I feel that sentiment is unfounded. A lot of it comes from a lack of observation. Because if I give you 3 towns that you can physically move to, sure, and there might be some small content. Maybe you can like go to a shop early or something.
Mm-hmm.
Just because I present those to you and let you go there, if the story only proceeds by going to one specific town, have I really presented you 3 options?
Yeah.
Not really. I've given you the illusion of choice. The problem, I think, is that this is not a tabletop role-playing game. It is far removed from its ancient ancestor, Dungeons and Dragons. So, everybody's favorite team, Beck's Badasses, make another appearance soon.
So they're still kicking around down here?
I mean, for a little bit. I think at this point you can encounter them on demand as regular enemies. Or soon. At some point, I think they become enemies that I think you can just fight them just by going through like a loading transition, you know?
Yeah.
I have to admit, I didn't seek them out multiple times. I think I just incidentally passed through this area in the sort of free roam chapter they have later.
Yeah.
A couple of times, and they were back every time.
Does that guy always end up like that?
Yeah. They're fine. They'll sleep it off. But we don't have any more time for Beck's Badasses because it is Barret Time. This raises just a small point, just real fast. One thing that bugged me early on is you couldn't pick which character you wanted to lead the party. You always have to be stupid pretty boy Cloud.
Yeah.
It's a bother because you get to control all of the party members at some point during the game.
Yeah.
And it looks like they even have a lot of the more sophisticated environment animations like ladder climbs and idling and bench sit-downs. I don't know if they ever present an opportunity for Aerith to sit on a bench, but I bet she has one, even if they didn't use it.
Mm-hmm.
This is one of the harder portions of the game for me in hard mode because I have this burning desire to blast all of these crates, but there's nothing for me in them. There's nothing that they can give me that I care about.
Except for being blown up.
Yeah, except for just the destructive desire of clearing these shelves. I've mentioned it before, Barret has sort of emerged as my favorite character of Remake.
Yeah.
I wish that I could play as him on demand. Hey, this is something that I'm not sure if you're aware of. Wedge died in the original game.
Oh.
When the tower collapsed. Jesse, and Biggs all died around that scene. So this scene, perhaps, I don't remember if this underground facility was in the original game at all. All of this is off script and might be a failure on the part of the Spectres.
Mm-hmm. So the Spectres are the ones they're trying to preserve a certain timeline.
Yes.
And
that being the original game, presumably.
Yeah. And so it's not working. I mean, not all the way.
Yeah, I'm kind of interested to see where they're going to take this in future installments, just because it seems like Wedge might wind up being an important character moving forward.
Yeah.
People suggest that it's ambiguous if he dies anyway at the end of this game.
Mm-hmm.
But what people seem to fail to recognize is that he was in danger of being like pushed down an elevator shaft or something.
Yeah.
Nobody dies from falling in this game.
Yeah.
Ever. He's actually safer at the bottom of that shaft than he would have been anywhere else. That's the safest place for him. This is an example of a boss that has a horde of minions at its beck and call that I think is more successful than other examples of that in this title.
So what is another boss in the game that has a horde of enemies that is less successful?
Sorry, I'm pulling from the future.
Yeah.
It is future experience.
Oh, I see.
It's the second fight with the Abzu. The one that I consider to be the worst in the game.
Well, we'll see that when we get to it, I guess.
Yeah. Right now, though, I much prefer what they've done here. They give you an extended amount of time to fight these enemies, like the minions before the boss shows up.
Mm-hmm.
Which I think is an important element to keep it from feeling unfair. There is a small problem that I believe we have footage. Ultimately, it's a small thing that resulted in me having to try this fight again. And now the analysis screen effectively lies to the player. Sometimes it's a lie of omission.
Yeah.
These enemies can cast sleep in hard mode once the boss shows up.
Ugh.
Yeah. Yeah, man. That's the exact right noise. Thank you. They can cast sleep once the boss shows up, and ultimately that was responsible for Tifa getting jumped on and having to restart this battle with sleep immunity. And it's frustrating because I had it.
Yeah, if they had just let you know.
I probably would have done it on the first try because I would have come in with sleep immunity, because that can, case in point, it can be a make or break resistance. An entire battle can hinge on having sleep immunity.
That's one thing that I really don't like, is when you fail from something that you could not have learned in the fight. Like, you have to lose once or get lucky.
Yeah, because I mean, especially in this title, it lacks a ribbon-esque piece of equipment. It is rare, if not impossible, to run around with broad immunity. You know? So it's very unlikely that even if before every boss you say, like, I'm just gonna pick a random status ailment and make myself immune to it.
Yeah.
Just based on the numbers, you're not likely to pick the correct one. It's especially frustrating in this case because I did check. I went in, like I did before every boss battle on hard mode, I went to the analysis page and I tried to think of weaknesses to exploit.
Yeah.
Problem techniques that the enemy might have. It doesn't say that they have sleep.
Yeah.
It makes no mention of it.
Ooh.
I think that this fight presents an adequate example of something that I've been pondering for a while. I think that they might have been overly stingy with certain materia. Because, for example, I tried a new strategy in this battle where speaking of sleep, I brought Sleep Magnify because I thought if I kill these enemies, they're probably just going to respawn. I think that that's what happens. But if I put them to sleep, I bet they will effectively be removed from the fight longer. Elemental, Magnify, and a few others, I feel like they could have given more specific variations of those materia to give you a little more flexibility. For example, a specialized Magnify materia that you could only attach it to status ailments. Like, they could have called it like Magnify-S. For example, something like that. Another example would be an elemental materia that could only be slotted into armor, so you could benefit from the defense bonus. Because I think far too often in this game, there was usually no question as to what I was going to use my materia for. If I'm fighting a creature like Shiva, I'm going to use it defensively to become immune to all damage. Otherwise, though, it's probably going to be spent offensively. So I would have liked to see like a variation of the elemental materia that could only be used in armor. I think that they could have done that to present a little more tactical flexibility without letting people break the game apart. And now, in conclusion, I considered trying this battle again so I could beat it with a move like Catastrophe, but the designers just have access to tools that I don't as a player. Cloud jumping in with that big aerial slash, there's no real way to mirror that in gameplay. And if Barret's just going to use one of his limit breaks, I think his less fantastic one.
Yeah.
At the end of this anyway, might as well just let him achieve victory that way. So there's the end of another chapter. This might be unique to my perception of the game. We are now quickly approaching what I think of as the beginning of the climax to this title.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't track at all with like the number of hours invested, but structurally, narratively, you have time spent in a sort of pseudo open world situation, a free roam experience, at least large enough to warrant fast travel points with Chocobo.
Yeah.
And then after that, in my book, it's all just climax for the rest of the game. I can't imagine somebody stopping halfway through what comes after that. It's sort of like once you set out for the Shinra building, there's this pressure to keep going until the game is done.
Yeah, because it just keeps topping itself.
Yeah. And also it's sort of like, well, it's just the Shinra building. How much should be left, you know?
Yeah.
And then it's 12 hours later, the game is done, and you're already Googling Final Fantasy VII Remake Part 2? Part 2 release date? Part 2 question mark.